Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Just wanted to introduce myself a little bit. I am been here at Zoom for about 4 months now. A little bit about my background is I spent about 15 years at Microsoft. In those years, I had the pleasure of about 5 years. I ran all the cryptography services within the we call the Developer Services Organization. So I owned all the cryptography from Windows to SQL to Azure. It was quite an interesting job. I mean, it's considered critical infrastructure, and so it was great experience to really build and invest in security and create a really high bar there. After that, I had a little fun. I went into Xbox Live and ran Xbox Live services. I have to admit that one of the fringe benefits that I had there was that, of course, part of the testing, everybody in the Xbox division had their own Xbox in their offices, and then, of course, being the security organization, you have to be able to test the games. So we had stacks and stacks of the games. So that was awesome to be able to do that. That was fun. So then I moved over to Salesforce, where the company, when I went on board at Salesforce, it was about 20,000 employees, and they were asking me to really build up their security operations organization. What that was I owned identity and access management for the products. I also owned all the encryption for the products. So doing the encryption at rest, in transit, all that kind of good stuff. Also owned this kind of the standard security functions like intrusion detection. One of my fun ones, the red team, had threat intelligence, the network security, system security, incident response, and whatnot. So that was a lot of fun. Now, I'm going to start talking about Zoom and navigating through, really the pandemic. So I'm sure everybody knows what Zoom is. I mean, technically we are a verb now, so that's very, very interesting. Just in case anybody needs a refresher, I wanted to really, this is the detailed explanation of Zoom helps businesses and organizations bring their teams together in a frictionless environment to get more done. We're all about making our platform easy, reliable, from the video, voice, content sharing, chat, and we do it across mobile devices, desktops, telephones, you name it. But let's really get to talk about what we're here for. So when I think a little bit about before the pandemic, Zoom really was not known around the world. We were really focused in on being an enterprise company. And our platform was really built for enterprise customers who had IT administrators and whatnot that could help put all the controls in place for configuring Zoom properly. And so we didn't design Zoom with the foresight that suddenly every person in the world, from a grandmother to students and everybody using this platform. And so, for example, back in December 2019, Zoom meetings reached a total of 10 million daily meeting participants. And then by April, we were at 300 million, which is just amazing. I mean, it's just incredible how fast we've scaled. Another one that I like to talk about a lot is by April 1st, we had about 90,000 schools across 20 countries that took us up on our offer, where we offered Zoom for free to help continue education remotely. So we experienced this extreme growth from a much broader set of users, moving from enterprise over to the consumer side, and both at the same time was an incredible challenge for us. And our product was being used in a myriad of unexpected ways. So there was all kinds of things that we were working through while we're quickly having to scale and support all the users. So quickly, I'll talk about the timeline. Back in March, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 as a global pandemic. And at that time, that's when we experienced our significant user growth. Between that time and April 1st, there was a bunch of things in the news. You know, the term Zoom bombing started coming up, and there was questions around where was our data routing? Was it routing through this country or that country? And so really what happened was Zoom announced, they heard all this news and reacted quickly to it. And Zoom announced a shifting in the priorities and a series of commitments related to security and privacy. So like over the next 90 days, we promised to dedicate the entire engineering organization and the whole company to identify, address, and fix a lot of those issues that were coming up. One of the other things that we wanted to do was really be open and transparent. And so we had this Ask Me Anything that Eric held, and he started it. It was on a weekly basis, and it was really digging deep into what we were doing, how far we were getting, and what our plans were really around getting things right and winning trust back. Because really this story is right when the pandemic hit, and all this news came up, we'd really had this loss of trust. And so the story I'm going to talk to you about is how in the world did we go back through this 90-day plan? How did we win trust back? And I really consider that chapter 1 of the story. I'm here to drive chapters 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 and beyond. And so how am I going to keep maintaining the trust of all of our customers? And it's an incredible story. Not many companies have gone through this kind of inflection point. And so I hope you learn from it and get good insights into how a fast startup kind of learned and transitioned and adapted and went through this. So on July 1st, we released 100 plus new features, and we released Zoom 5.0, which was really our line in the sand of getting everybody updated to that. We also bought a company called Keybase. Max Krohn was the CEO of Keybase, and we hired him and his incredible crypto engineers and team to do was to really help us step up and really focus in on this notion of how do we get to true end-to-end encryption. We actually feel that this is a innovation that is something that a lot of our competitors aren't doing. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that too. Of course, one thing that we announced, we had Zoomtopia, which is our annual conference that we have. And during the keynote, we talked about that the end-to-end encryption is going to be released later this week. So it's going to be, and then we're making it available to everybody, free and paid. We're not going to make this to where it's just going to be, okay, if you're a paid user, you get to use end-to-end encryption, flip that switch. It's going to be available for everybody. So I'm very, very excited for that. Now, I want to dig into the 90-day plan a little bit more detail, and specifically kind of the series of commitments we made to help us navigate through this. Because I think it's great from a case study perspective of when you look back at it afterwards, it's like, okay, how did we do this? How did we, go from where we were then, and then now we're continuing to add huge customers and still continue to grow. So here we go into the 90-day security plan. The first thing that I talked about was we really shifted our resources. Like it's kind of akin to, and this is one of my days in Microsoft, is back at Microsoft, there was this worm that came out called SQL Slammer, and it ended up severely impacting Microsoft. And Bill Gates at the time had this inflection point where he actually did something very similar. He sent out a memo and said, we've got to build in security and privacy by design. And Eric did the exact same thing. Eric really looked at this and he's like, okay, so I've got this inflection point. I'm hearing all this in the news around security and privacy. And he was like, I want to double, triple down on this. And so really took the whole team, all the other innovation that we had, and we took it offline to be able to focus in on. One is putting in AES 256 GCM encryption for all meetings. There was UI updates, upper left-hand corner, you can see there's a little security icon, encryption shield. You can click in that and see, what kind of encryption you have. One of the other things is when I think about security by default is having passcodes in waiting rooms. I talked a little bit about, we make this transition from being an enterprise company to consumer-based. And so when you would fire up a meeting, the defaults would be, there would be no password and there would be no waiting room. And so when you get your grandparents or somebody that doesn't know, like they just don't know how to use it, it puts it into a really bad position to where it's like, okay, if there's no passcode, then if somebody could find the meeting ID or guess a meeting ID, then they could essentially get into your meeting. And so we really shifted to where by default, you have to have a passcode or a waiting room. We also spent a lot of time on the education side on teaching everybody how to leverage these controls. One of the other things that came out of this as part of it was because in the news was, well, where's my data routing? So Zoom's all across the world, and how do I know if my data is going through here or here? And so what we do have, and this one's for paid customers, is you can actually, there's a checkbox where you can decide what data centers it goes through. So I could say, all right, I want whoever I'm having a meeting with, if I choose it's going to be on the West Coast of the United States, no matter where you're at in the world, it's always going to go through that server. Of course, there'll be latency if somebody's calling in from Singapore, as an example, or Australia, but it gives you that choice in that. And so that was another key feature that we had. And then, of course, talked about bringing in Max and his incredible team and really started focusing not only where we had AES 256 GCM encryption, was really putting us on that story of true end-to-end security. One of the other things we did was making sure that we had a comprehensive security and privacy review. And I would be remiss to say one of the most critical consultants, advisors, mentor, like I can't say enough good things, is Alex Stamos. Of course, he's a teacher at Stanford right now, and he is an incredible human being. He invested a ton of time into really helping us design this strategy. We also brought in Leah Kistner, who was an engineer or a lead engineer at Google in privacy. And she really dug into how is all the privacy functioning and how's our data and our practices around everything within Zoom. And those two were incredible. We also brought in Katie Musaris of Luda Security. She was actually at Microsoft one of the first to build a bug bounty, and so is really one of the preeminently known leaders in the bug bounty process. And so, we brought them in to really guide us and give us expertise. And I feel that's really important. If you take things alone and and don't bring in, people that are experts, it really makes it just a harder learning curve. And I can't thank the three of them enough on what they've done so far. One of the other things that came up was around transparency, around how did government request access to data? What could they have access to? So we actually put publicly our principles around what we can and can't do around requests that come from any sort of governments. we're actually working on providing a transparency report that talks about those requests that we're planning on releasing by the end of the year. We also updated our privacy policies, and then really made sure that everything in that privacy policy was representative and really uplifting our overall our practices. Another one of the areas is we really didn't have a bug bounty program. For those that you don't know what a bug bounty program, this audience probably does, but I'll quickly say bug bounty program is essentially a way to engage the security researchers for a company to essentially pay for researchers to find vulnerabilities. And this was something that we didn't really have much of a process in place. And we brought in Katie, and of course the help from Alex was really developed this central repository and workflow to be able to handle all this. The incredible growth of Zoom came with, of course, a lot of focus from researchers. And so there was a lot of volume of things coming in, and the team was getting overwhelmed. And so, we brought in Luda Security. We leverage HackerOne and BugCrowd, who does a lot of the triaging for us, and really put together a much more rigorous program. We had daily meetings, engaged much more with the security researchers, and then hired as the head of vulnerability and bug bounty. I hired the head of the NCC bug bounty practice. NCC is a top tier security consulting firm, and Adam Rudderman was the lead of that. And we were fortunate enough to be able to hire him, and now he's leading it. So the program is absolutely in fantastic hands right now. Another thing that was super important was this notion of getting voice of the customer. While we took the whole engineering team offline and we started working on all these sort of aspects of security, the most important thing was getting the voice of the customer. We'd heard from we saw in the news, we heard from researchers, but we needed to really engage the schools, financial services, a lot of our customers. And so I have a peer group that I work with, an incredible group of, there's 36 CISOs that are made up of from national defense to financial services, education, that really help provide me insight into, where should we be building? What should our product roadmap look like? How should I be investing in security? And they're just a phenomenal sounding board that I can leverage to get their insights and see what's important. And I felt it was so successful, we ended up doing them by vertical as well. So we ended up there's a CISO Council for Education, which has the higher education and K through 12. We have a financial services one, national defense. So we had all these verticals, and I was getting just incredible feedback from these CISOs. And in fact, they ended up, because of this level of transparency that we were providing, it went to the level of, I provided to the presentations that I was providing to the board of directors around what I was going to do, was I used this group as a sounding board, and it really gained the trust of those leaders. And so it was an incredibly powerful relationship we had. And this is something that I still do. I actually have one on Friday coming up. So it's something that we're going to continue to do. And we got great feedback on features. Actually, one of the favorites that I just announced at Zoomtopia was this, we're calling it video waiting rooms. And what we'd found, in particular in K through 12, teachers would have the students in the waiting room, but couldn't see them. So wasn't sure if it was them. What the video waiting rooms do is where you can actually see them. You can see their faces and you can see like, okay, this is my student and I'll let them in. And so that is something that we announced at Zoomtopia that's going to be coming out in early next year, that we're going to be putting that out. So the feedback that we got was incredible to help us really guide our product strategy and really win that trust back. Another thing that we did is, while we do have our own security development lifecycle where we do threat models and whatnot inside and code reviews internally, is felt that it's important to have a third-party review, to where there's this notion of white box and black box penetration tests. Now, black box one is where it's a standard, you don't get access into the systems. So it's just from an outside in, what can I hack, what can I get in? A white box is they're doing the same thing, but they also have access to code, understand the configurations. So it's a much more thorough type of penetration test. And we actually had 3 companies come in and look at different areas of our platform and our clients. So we had that third-party view. We used NCC, Bishop Fox, and Trail of Bits to do this work for us. And like I said, they looked at our production environment, public and colo data centers. They looked at our core web applications. They looked at the corporate network, and then our SDK, our public APIs as well. So we did this holistic view and having a third party. The other thing is while we did this in the 90 days and we worked on fixing the vulnerabilities in that space, we're actually going to keep on doing this. We're going to keep having them come back on a recurring basis to be able to do reviews. And we really just felt that on top of getting that voice of the customer and focusing in on security, having the third party really helped us get to where we can win that trust back, because a lot of the enterprises that were using us during the early days were like, I see all the stuff in the news, what's going on? And they were getting concerned. And so these were really the core things that we did. And then last but not least was, I talked about it a little bit earlier, was Eric had an Ask Me Anything and had every Wednesday over 3 months talked about what we were doing in privacy and security. And it was open to everybody, all customers, not even just customers. Anybody could go and see what was being talked about for Zoom. We brought in our executives. We had Alex in there a bunch, and Leah and Katie. So, I mean, we brought in all the leaders to help us talk about the progress we're making and what we're working on. We actually had one this morning at 10 a.m. And what we did was we did a deep dive on end-to-end encryption and talking about our story around the phase 1 that we're doing now and moving to phase 2 and phase 3. The other thing is all questions were being answered in this. It wasn't like we weren't blocking any questions. It was, we were going to answer all the questions. The other thing is Eric was crystal clear that we're going to do these until people start not showing up to these meetings. We're still doing those. We're going to continue doing those and talking publicly about our security and privacy and what we're doing in our roadmaps and what lessons learned we're doing. So this is really kind of the whole wrap up of that security 90-day security plan. I felt that, reflecting back on it, since I was relatively new and I was coming in on the back end of the strategy, this was something that I saw as well. So I was at Salesforce and Zoom reached out, and I'd seen really how the team adapted. And I had this opportunity to, of course, Eric interviewed me, and I really wanted to understand from him. I'm like, so what did you learn on this? And in the back of my head, I was like, is this just security strategy like 90 days and we're going to go back to normal? or what's his thought process? And Eric, he's just a phenomenal leader. He was like, you know, what made us successful, that got us to here, isn't going to get us further. He's like, we have to adapt, we have to learn, we have to listen to our customers. And so he took this totally to his heart and really felt that was the kind of the inspiration that I was looking for. I was like, is he just looking to, okay, going to bring in Jason and then kind of keep going, and Jason can work on the security side? It was like, no, Eric is still heavily engaged in the security side, and is just very passionate about making sure that security, privacy, and trust in our platform is out there, is going to continue. So it's an incredible story. All right, so I talked about that first 90 days was the, what was the chapter 1, and then my job is to get us to what is chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And my strategy is really 3-pronged, where what I consider of nail the basics. I talked to you a little bit already about security and privacy by design. So this is really the notion of, whenever we put in security controls, how do we make sure that when somebody fires up Zoom for the first time, that it's secure by default? How do we make it easy to use? How do we make sure that it's it's just one of those, it's baked in, privacy and security is baked into every part of our product. The other thing is more on the internal side, which is common security controls. So one of the things about our architecture at Zoom is we run on Oracle Cloud, we run on AWS, we have colos and our own like data centers. And so what happens really easily is that, for example, you could use different technologies to solve for each one of these environments. I call it a multi-substrate environment. And it's really easy to say, like, okay, so if we're going to do, let's say, multi-factor authentication, to where it's, if we're going to allow our production engineers access into each one of these environments, it's really easy to say, like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to use native Oracle, then I'm going to use native AWS, and then I'm going to use something that we have for on-prem. From a security management perspective, that's super tough, because you've got 3 different controls, 3 different ways that you're going to configure it. And then from an end user perspective, it's like 3 different ways and sets of passwords or authenticators or whatnot. So to me, one of the key parts of nailing the basics is you just have one type of security control across the company, so that if it's multi-factor auth, it's done the exact same way in each one of these environments. And that it's not a different technology, because it's really easy to get bifurcated in that sort of scenario. And the last one of nail the basics is what I consider is happy, secure customers. This is end-to-end encryption is a perfect example of this. It is so easy. It's literally flip a switch and the meeting is going to be end-to-end encrypted. It is easy. There isn't like, think about like, oh, do I have to generate a key? Do I have to provide a key? Do I have to, like, it could be such a complicated thing. And Max's team has just done a phenomenal job to make it easy to use, easy to turn on. Same thing with like passcodes in waiting rooms. There's always this discussion around like, well, if we add security, it makes the product hard to use. We really feel that, like, as I consider of what is a nail the basic for me, is I've got to balance both of those, because what's made our platform successful is the ease to use. Like, anybody could use it, from grandparents to kindergartners, like everybody's using it. I can't make it to where it's like you've got to, sprinkle pixie dust and do this and that to get all the security and make it hard. It's got to be easy. And so that is like the number one thing, is getting those basics in. The second one is really this notion of business agility. One is a common compliance framework. Well, it sounds super boring. What it is It's to be able to do business in multiple countries, you're going to have different regulatory regimes, different privacy requirements. You're going to have different security requirements. I talked earlier about that common security controls. So a common compliance framework makes it to where, so I've got, if an MFA is the same everywhere, and I've got intrusion detection is the same everywhere, when we've got these like privacy certifications, it's actually really easy to add on new compliance frameworks to apply to those, because I'm like, here's all my controls. I can add on all of these. And the reason why this is called business agility is because it helps sales. It helps you, it helps the customers ensure they know that you're meeting their requirements, and that they're meeting local laws, all that kind of stuff. So it's like a table stakes in terms of when you're doing business globally, that you have to meet all these. Just like here, California, CCPA, we've got GDPR, we've got all these privacy, like the global privacy requirements. These are like must do's, they're not optional. So you've got to have an easy way to be able to apply all of those requirements to your security controls. One of the more fun ones that I like to do is when we think about the amazing part about Zoom is how fast we innovate. And so in the context of Happy Path designs is, how do I not get in front of those developers? How do I not slow them down? And the example I'll give you is, let's say the developer's coming up with a new audio stream. It's going to do something. And they want to make sure it's encrypted. What I don't want them to do is go and try to find, oh, is there an open source crypto library you can use? Or, oh, is that the right one? To me, what a Happy Path design is in the engineering system, it's literally like click, they can plug into my API that I provide them. It's automatically there. They know how it's going to be used. It's easy, it's fast, and they don't have to worry about it. So it's actually taking work away from them, and it's making it easier for them to put in the security controls as part of their development process. So they get to go faster. Operational excellence is another one, is making sure that these are things that are like the core KPIs of security, where it's like, I need to make sure that I can respond to incidents fast, contain the incidents fast, make sure that we're patching quickly, making sure that we're updating all of our open source. So operational excellence is really about how I can make sure that we're going fast and quickly to make sure that we're retaining that security bar that we put in place. Now, the most fun part is raise the bar. It's clearly hire the top talent. It is super important for me to really focus in on. I talked about like the head of NCC bug bounty programs, that practice, Adam Rudderman. We're making sure to bring in top people to be able to support and run all these services. So that's something that I'm just constantly doing is trolling through LinkedIn, making sure, like seeing who's doing great research and bringing in other researchers. Who can I hire? The other thing is this notion of zero trust. Now, most of the CISOs know that CISOs, we've been talking about the notion of zero trust for years, which is that this idea that the network is not your perimeter. It's really your identity and your endpoints, your laptops. That's really your perimeter. And what zero trust means is it puts a lot of focus on your identity, making sure that it's you and your system that's logging into these environments, and putting Google with BeyondCourt. I mean, there's been a lot of investment in this, but it hasn't been industry-wide. And the pandemic has accelerated that incredibly because everybody's really moving into this hybrid work model in the future. Or there's companies that have announced that they're just going to allow people to stay remote. There is no more corporate network where you're going to log in your office and you're in your network. and have that kind of security, everybody's remote. So this is something that CISOs have been talking about, and it is something that everybody has to embrace. Consistent compliance, another one that's not so exciting, but the notion behind this one is that there's no surprises. So when you have, there's being an online service, there's a ton of certifications that you basically accumulate over time. If I remember when I was at Salesforce, we had over 100 of them. And it's the biggest thing is you want to make sure that you're consistently looking at how are you making sure that you're meeting it quarter over quarter, all the requirements that you say you're going to meet. To me, consistent compliance is making sure there's no surprises. Surprises as a CISO is never a good thing. And so consistent compliance means we're humming along. We're constantly monitoring our controls, making sure that we're going to meet all of our audits. And there's nothing when the audit time comes where it's like, surprise, here's a finding. Consistent compliance keeps us from that side of surprise. And then last but not least is innovative security features. End-to-end security or end-to-end encryption is one of those that I see as innovative. This notion of where Zoom cannot see any of the traffic going from your meeting to another person's meeting. I don't have the keys. The keys are created on your client. I can't access them. So Zoom itself cannot even see this traffic, let alone somebody else that if they were to break into Zoom or something like that, can't see it. I love that feature. One of the things that comes up is I heard a little bit about the four CISOs. I was snuck in on that one a little bit and hearing about a day in the life of, and this is actually a presentation a slide that I gave to the board of directors. And so what I remember hearing with the CISOs is, so what are my main accountabilities? I really saw myself as a CISO is my accountability is to measure the security maturity across the company. And by doing that, what I did was I'm a huge fan of using external frameworks. What I found is if you create custom frameworks internally, it doesn't resonate with customers. Like if I go to the CISO of a large bank and I say I'm using this cybersecurity framework to benchmark my security, they're going to know, I know exactly what you're talking about. The one thing that I do is I actually have a third party measure the maturity of the security. It's not actually my team doing it, so that I get a good view of what is the maturity of the whole program across the company. The other thing I do, it's important as this, is that you benchmark. So great, you get this security maturity, it tells you a number, and you're like, well, what does this number mean? We actually asked to be benchmarked against our peers and against our competitors. What are their numbers? Where are they at? So that I have a benchmark to know, am I better? Am I worse? Is there things that I need to improve upon? So now I got this list of things I need to fix. The second item here is, what's the most important risk? As most CISOs know, is we don't have unlimited budget. We have to prioritize. And this is where risk management comes in, is when I think about, first is I've got this measurement of security controls of how mature they are. Okay, which one do I do first? This is where risk management comes to play and says, here's the control. This is the highest risk control. And we leverage NIST, and FAIR is something that I'm working on. I've actually heard from other CISOs, and what FAIR does is it helps to monetize the risk, so that I actually have like a dollar amount behind what those risks are. But to know which ones are the most important that I focus on first is critical. And then of course, the last one is, I've talked about this, common to me is similar to making things simple, making them simplistic. when it's something's common and it makes it easier for it. And I try to simplify processes and simplify things as much as possible. And so measuring the effectiveness of the security controls is another critical aspect of the security framework. So this is really what I use to present to the board of directors to say, this is what I feel accountable for. And it resonated very well with them. Wanted to quickly, just checking the time. Okay, so it's 2:40. All right, I'll quickly go through this. We talk about nailing the basics and the common security controls. I talked about example of like intrusion detection, multi-factor auth. This is really what you'd see in a cybersecurity framework, in the NIST cybersecurity framework. It's got these items. So these are like these controls are the ones that I really try to drive common across the organization. So when it comes to network and system security, encryption, secrets, PKI, all that kind of good stuff. Another critical aspect of it is the program of, okay, great, you did this AMA, you did this 90-day security plan. So how are you going to make sure to keep building that trust with customers? I'm clearly going to keep doing the CISO forums, advisory councils. We're super proactive during Zoomtopia around end-to-end encryption. And so there's a number of things. The other important thing that I really push into is I want people on my team doing presentations and going out to conferences and presenting. And I want us to be looking at what there's opportunity for patent security research. So it's really a team effort on this one. And so I love individuals on the team that love getting out there and sharing knowledge and learning from others. I think it's just a super important thing to do. Quickly, just to talk a little bit about recent enhancements that we did. We put in 2FA, two-factor authentication. Being that this group is all security, definitely would understand what this one is. It makes it easier to reduce the risk of identity theft. And it makes it easier to be able to, if you don't have an SSO, we can provide it for you. If you don't want to use some sort of single sign-on service that maybe you don't have an IT department. So this is something that we can provide. My favorite, we talked a little bit about this, end-to-end encryption. This was one of our first end-to-end encryption meetings we had, a picture of it in there. So that was a lot of fun. It's going to be available end, I think we're targeting end of this week. And it's really 3 phases. So this phase was this notion of prior Zoom servers would provide the key out to the clients. And so what we've done is the keys are generated on the clients now. So your Zoom application, it's generated on the client so that we don't have access to it. When you think about further in the story of end-to-end encryption is really binding that key to your identity. So when you think of like what true, like full end-to-end encryption is really our 3-phase story that we have. We actually have a white paper on it. Alex Stamos helped out a ton, super appreciative on that. So there's all kinds of details on there, so I won't go in super deep on this, but very excited about our path on this. And then I think this is near the end, so I'll be able to open it up so they'll have any questions, is really this, what does 2021 look like for us? It's really making sure that security and privacy is in everything that we do. Everything that we're seeing right now is that things aren't going to change too much. There is going to be this hybrid workplace in the future where some folks are going to be working from home. Some are going to only come in once or twice a day into the workplace. And so we see that we need to be able to, Zoom needs to be ready to enable that and make sure that our platform can give the best experience in video communications. And then of course, we're going to continue on our path around working with the single sign-on solution providers to really start putting identity and binding that into our end-to-end encryption story for phase 2. And that is it. I really appreciate everybody's time. I know I'm the last person for the day. I want to thank everybody very much. I know you've been using a lot, all of you have been using Zoom a lot, super appreciated. And thank you very much. And I think what we're going to do is open it up for questions here. So I'm going to go.
Hi, Jason. This is Tad right here. I'm going to moderate the Q&A for you.
All right.
First of all, I want to say thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. As you said, we are a heavy user of Zoom, so we really appreciate you taking the time to come out here and chat with us. Mm-hmm. All right, so we have a question here from Christina. It's amazing what you have done. We all share that feeling. How do you personally deal with the fact that whatever change you make or risk you overlook affect so many people around the world in a highly visible way?
That's a great question. The way we do this is by we are very rigorous around any changes that we make that have a customer impact. And we put in a lot of process in there, a lot of testing, and a lot of conversation around what does that mean? What's that impact? And Eric is huge on this. You know, I talked about voice of the customer, and that is like first and foremost, actually is the most important principle is how does this impact our customers? And so that is always at top of our mind.
Oh, great. We have a question from Matthew. How many staff are in the information security office at Zoom?
I'd say right now it's over 100, and we have a ton of positions open. So if anybody's graduating anytime soon, they're more than happy to take a look on the jobs. We have a ton of killer jobs, but the security team's growing. It's the reason why I kind of hesitated is it's like we're hiring like crazy. And so growing like crazy.
I'm sure it'd be a great experience to work at Zoom in the information security office there. We have another question from Christina. And this is an interesting one. Many people are reimagining virtual events. How is that reimagining affecting your Zoom design/development plans?
I've got one thing to say is on Zoomtopia, we announced on Zoom because that is exactly what we were looking at was which on Zoom is a way that you can, what happened before so for example, let's say yoga class, you're going to a yoga class, you would have to have a way, how would you register it? How do you collect your money? You're using different platforms. What on Zoom does is you're actually using Zoom and you can do the registration, you can do the payment all in one place. So we're looking at all those scenarios where they look very kind of broken in terms of integrations. And we're like, how do we help solve this? So now you can just go, you can get the registration through Zoom, and then you get that, you can pay, and then you get your link to go into the Zoom meeting or whatever the class is. So we're definitely taking that feedback, and that's a great example of that.
Well, sounds like you guys have a firm grasp on your roadmap there. A question from Anonymous. What is done to make sure that the audio and video quality won't degrade when end-to-end encryption is turned on? I'm sorry about the background noise there.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'll show you the Zoom the setting to help with that after this. So what we do is the quality is like one of our hallmarks. A lot of our competitors, it's like you can't have so many people in and you have the uninterrupted video, and that is one of our things. So like we orient all around that. And that's why like it's taken us this long of a focus with Max's team, and we really dug in to make sure that we didn't have that impact, because we knew the most important thing is we don't want to have your robotic voice. It's got to be the same smooth voice and video that you're used to. Like we cannot degrade it. So that was absolutely the top priority, and a very interesting challenge for Max's team and the rest of the team to work on.
Another question here from Christina. How do you work with the enterprise risk management function to get the leadership focus and resources for your cyber risk management?
Well, good question. I would say in normal circumstances, you would, and the reason why I say normal circumstances is because right after this 90 days, I haven't really had a challenge in getting the funding that I've needed right now. I'll start with that. However, we do have a risk management program that's a security risk management program that highlights our risks, and we characterize that and measure it in when you consider enterprise risk. It's we weigh the security risk versus, like, if it's a comparative to needing more sales or more people in finance or whatnot. And so we do have that comparison at the the boardroom meeting, essentially. But with security being such a priority right now, like I just, it hasn't been, I haven't had that challenge at the moment around getting the support that I need.
Should never let a good crisis go to waste, right?
You said it.
Question from Bruce. Do you guys are planning to support IPv6?
I do not know that question. It's a good question, but I apologize. I do not know that answer.
That's okay. Let's move on then. We do have a question from another user. Similar to other social medias, do you have to watch the security of the meeting content?
We can't. That's something. So the way that our platform's built is that something we can't see. So what that does is it does mean that we do have a trust and safety team that looks for abuse and looking for if there's, like, for example, if there's certain profiles of people that are joining from certain areas, like we kind of have a risk scoring process, but we can't look at the content. That's not something that we do in there. So that makes it a little bit different for us.
It's always good not to be in the position where you have to be the gatekeeper for information, right?
That's right. That's right.
Can people in China use Zoom? That's an interesting question.
So what's the question?
Can people in China use Zoom?
Yes, there's people all over the world using Zoom. We have as part of the, like when I talked about the data center routing, China is one of the data centers.
Will the end-to-end encryption have an impact on that?
Right now it's available for everybody.
Okay. Okay, this is a fun question here, I suppose. Okay. Why do all Zoom password links end in 09? I'm not even sure if that is true or not, but
I don't know if it does. I don't think it does, but I can check into that. I don't know that off the top of my head.
I wouldn't waste any time checking on it.
But it's a good question. I'll definitely take note of that and see if that's the case.
Okay, so we have another question here from Christina. How important is proposed regulation around privacy, for example, to your security strategy in Zoom?
Proposed. I guess and so I'm answering this as a CISO. As a CISO, I know the previous CISOs that had talked, they said they have a legal partner. I actually have there's a chief privacy officer. Her name's Lynn Holland. She's phenomenal. So that's actually a partnership that I have with her for her to keep me apprised of what's coming, because I don't have legal folks on my team, and I look to Lynn and Jeff True is our general counsel. And so they really are my partners in helping me on those to help me understand if I do need to make any of those types of changes.
Right, so we are running out of time. So maybe for one more question here. Christina is asking, in Salesforce, there is a Chief Trust Officer. In Zoom, do you also perform that role?
Let's see here. So the Chief Trust Officer, clearly I just came from there, so I know Jim super well. He is, again, phenomenal leader. I wouldn't be here without him. He has, the notion of trust is very similar. It's everything security that he has, end-to-end security. And so same thing for me is I have that. I think it's another term for Chief Information Security Officer as a Chief Trust Officer. I like that title. It's a very cool title, but he has a huge scope. Clearly, Salesforce is just an enormous company, but I'd say when I think about it, it's a very similar scope. He probably covers more in the resiliency side as well, and availability. Well, great questions. Great questions. I like them.
Well, thank you again, Jason, for spending this time with us and for sharing your insights and advice.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.